Well, good evening, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here. It's always a treat to see what you're doing at the Royal Oak Historical Society. I called it the Hysterical Society at one point, and that got quite a laugh with people. So I must learn to get that right. I'm told I'm introducing myself, so apart from being Vicki Sanders, I am a Saanich councillor. I have been for 9 years. And I've always been very fortunate to have portfolios that I've enjoyed. I chaired the Arts Cultural Heritage Committee the first year I was elected and was moved on to environment. I wasn't quite sure what I'd done wrong because I have a great passion for arts and heritage. But I think I lobbied too hard for heritage, and it's not everybody that shares that. But after 7 wonderful years with the environment, which I had a great passion for as well, to save, I've been sent back to Arts Cultural Heritage, so this is absolutely awesome. So I have a great passion for heritage, as I have a long history, not me personally, but with my ancestors within Greater Victoria and such. I'm, on my maternal side, I'm 4th generation. My great-grandfather coming from Quebec City in 1859. I was fortunate a few years ago to be going to a conference in Quebec City, so I spent an extra time and managed to find some family roots there, and I'll continue with that eventually again sometime. My father was just a newcomer because his family came here in 1903 with the Royal Engineers, and he was born here in 1906. So he was quite impressed with all these relations my mother had. 13 aunts and uncles, and of course she just wanted to stay away from all that. But I got a great passion for heritage because my dad and I would spend many Saturday nights poring over old city directories that he had bought and trying to resurrect where the streets had gone at that time. So it's a great treat to come here. It's a great treat to participate in learning some of the history of a community that I didn't know well. My parents dragged me out of Oak Bay when I was a young child to Saanich. I was kicking and screaming, of course, but I've learned to love it and would not think there's any better place than living in Saanich. So my memories of Royal Oak are basically driving through it to go to the airport to pick up my father as he was coming home from some conference, and going to Elk Lake or Beaver Lake, where they had that little fantasy place where you saw those creatures, these storybook, what was it called, Storyland? Wood, that's right. So those are my memories of Royal Oak, but as a councillor, I certainly have learned a lot about Royal Oak, and of course, I was allowed out of my small compound in Lake Hill after a while, so I did find out there was more places in Saanich growing up. I have had a great time looking back on the history of the municipal halls with Saanich, because Enid said that's what she would really like to hear about. And you hear all sorts of stories, and certainly with the Heritage Register, I had known something about it, but I pored over the records in the archives, and I've garnered a little bit of information that I hope that you'll enjoy this evening. So I'll start first with to lay a bit of history, and I know you people are experts at this, so if it's not quite right, you can tell me afterwards. Don't boo and hiss. When I finish talking about that, I'd like to give you a little bit of an overview of the archives, because that's one of the most valuable tools. Well, it is the most valuable tool we have for groups like yourself or just the general public on learning what has gone before with our ancestors and the history of Saanich. So in 1852, Saanich, both north and south, purchased from the First Nations people by James Douglas, the agent for HBC. So that was purchased by the Hudson's Bay Company. The Saanich South purchase was completed on February the 6th, 1852, and the agreement was signed by Chief Wat Say Mullet and 9 others. It was witnessed by Joseph William McKay and Richard Coolidge, clerks of the Hudson's Bay Company. And the purchase price was £41, 13 shillings and 4 pence. I did a conversion on the internet last night. It was about $110. Bit of a steal, I'd say. The deeded land comprised of an area from Mount Douglas and Cowichan Head on the canal to Harrow, and extending through the centre of Vancouver Island north and south. The conditions of the deed were that village sites and enclosed fields were to be kept for the First Nations use and their children and those who followed after them. The land itself would become the property of the white people forever. The First Nations were at liberty to hunt over the unoccupied land and carry on the fisheries. And the name Saanich was supposed to have meant the land of plenty. Early developments had been established at Craigflower, where the old Craigflower School still stands. Settlements covered much of Saanich close to the city, Mount Ptolemy. They also were settled at Mount Newton, and the first school in the municipality was at St. Stephen's Church at Mount Newton in 1862. The electoral district was created by the Representation Act in 1859. That actually was the same year my great-grandfather came to Victoria. Saanich was allotted one member. The first list of voters for the new district was published in the British Colonist on Saturday, December 3rd, 1859. It consisted of 21 names. 11 of them also appeared on the Victoria City, 2 on the Esquimalt and Machosen County district, leaving 8 apparent bona fide residents of the Saanich district. You'll perhaps recognize many of those 8 pioneer names: Bull, Coles, Deeks, Lingate, McPhail, Morrell, Simpson, and Thompson. 20 years later, in 1877, the Victoria list contained 190 years. Victoria District is described as an area that embraces many fine and valuable farms and includes the settlements of Lake and Saanich. Lake, of course, refers to what we now call Royal Oak, so it was distinctly referred to something different than just Saanich. In 1866, a school was built at Royal Oak on a land given by the Rileys, but from what I've read before, it was Bailey's. So there's a bit of a contradiction in the information that you read. Sometimes it's Bailey, sometimes it's Riley. It burnt down and was reopened in 1883 with an increase in pupils. The settlement at Royal Oak was establishing and growing. You've already talked about the Saanich Archives has recently acquired the Lake School Board minutes from 1878 to 1906. And I'm glad to see, Irvina, that some of you are vigorously reading them on the Saanich Archives website. And of course, that Lake School became Royal Oak School. The schoolhouse is what has brought your group together, and I think that is quite interesting, just for your development in your neighborhood and moving the schoolhouse from where it was tucked away in the back corner and used by scouts and lions and such, that it now has become a very viable contributor in your community. Tuesday night, we had a heritage agreement that came forward for the store at Admirals and Gorge Road, which you'll probably remember as Brookman's store. And one of my counselors said it's the only second successful heritage agreement in Saanich, and he referred to the Royal Oak Scout House. When I got to speak, I corrected him. He did pass me notes and said, well, it was a scout hall. I said, yes, but it was a schoolhouse with scouts. I digress. By 1905, the population of the district had increased considerably. There was a strenuous opposition to become forming a municipality. However, the number in favor of becoming a municipality carried the day. A compromise was suggested that only the Victoria district should incorporate, leaving out Lake and South Saanich. The proposed line would run from Cedar Hill top into Knockin above Prospect Lake Inlet. The district progressed farming actively until 1906, when a petition was presented to have North and South Saanich incorporated separately. On March the 1st, 1906, Saanich Municipality was founded. Mr. F. Turgoose was appointed as returning officer at a meeting declared on March the 8th. Nomination was secured of 7 men to form council. I guess women were allowed to do that then. No election was needed. I think that's a treat. And they were declared elected on March the 10th. The first meeting, Mr. Thomas G. Braden was elected to act as reeve, and the councillors Quick, Deans, Grant, Dunn, and Pickle. Again, names that you will find quite familiar. I think it's interesting that I was elected in 2006, and that was 100 years after the Saanich had formed. So I had the great opportunity of participating in a lot of celebrations. The first council met at a private house on Glanford Avenue. It was a small house of 2 rooms, and a lean-to was secured for office and a meeting place. Partitions were removed to make way for a council table. The clerk's desk and a small desk. The first clerk was H.O. Case. This is the Hellinger House. So that was the first municipal hall, if you can imagine it. And it was rented for $5 a month for temporary offices. And in 1907, a shed was built on the side to shelter the horse. To celebrate the 75th anniversary of Saanich, the Housing and Urban Development Organization of Canada presented Saanich with this replica of the first municipal hall. And if you're ever over by the fire hall, on Blanchard or off Vernon, you will notice the little house there, and that is the replica of the original municipal hall. So take a trip over there sometime and have a look at that. That was 1981. After February the 9th, 1907, the meetings moved to the converted James Pym farmhouse at the corner of Blandford and Ben Elman Avenue. I unfortunately didn't find any photo of that. A ward system came into effect in 1908, but by October of 1949, by council direction, the ward system was abolished with the severance of Ward 6, which became Central Saanich. I've heard they might like to come back. That's that A word. During 1909, an attempt to dissolve the municipality took place, but the petitioners were too few to force the petition. By 1910, a committee had been formed to find ways and means to build a municipal hall. In that year, it was decided that council meetings would be held on Saturday at 3 p.m. instead of evenings as previous. Well, that would cut our numbers down if we tried that one. By 1911, it had been established that a municipal hall would have its own quarters. The location of the hall was a hot issue for the election of 1911. Fred and William James Quick were instrumental in getting the hall located in the Royal Oak area. They hired 3 rental cars. They were the only 3 on South Vancouver Island, and they canvassed the municipality for voters for the Royal Oak area. These cars, one touring the outer wards and the other in the inner area. The third one got stuck in Cedar Hill. The touring cars did the trick. The novelty of riding in a car was great for most voters. The site was located, and Mr. Durrance was given an option for $200 for his property across the road from his business at the Royal Oak Hotel. So eventually the property at 4512 West Saanich Road was purchased. Now rumors are that the municipal clerk used to retreat to the beverage house on warm days. He had a lookout at the top of the hill to watch for the buggy carrying a dignitary from Victoria or one of the elected officials might be approaching. Thus he could spend many a pleasant hour contemplating the virtues of bylaws. On the 11th of March, financing of the hall was approved. Mr. John Charles Malcolm Keith was retained as architect to complete the design. Keith came to Victoria in 1892 after he won the design competition for the Christchurch Cathedral. And he was responsible for several important civic and institutional buildings in Victoria, including the First Presbyterian Church on Quadra Street, the Moss Street School, and the Police Court on Fisgard Street. Certainly, the Saanich Municipal Hall remains the humblest of his civic commissions. On a personal note, the First Presbyterian Church was the church that my same great-grandfather I talked about, Alexander Wilson, was one of the founding members of. Keith's original design was significant as a work of architecture. It essentially belongs to the domestic scale of small administrative buildings of that time. It was built on a handsome fieldstone foundation and consists of an oblong block with a large entrance porch. The wall surfaces were covered with stained shingles and gracefully flared hip roofs surmounted by a decorative open octagon. There it is under construction. The generous window area and wide eaves denote Keith's professional training and understanding the proportions of architecture on a smaller scale. The hall was completed in 1911 at the cost of $4,364. The building contract was awarded on March 18 to C.M. Merkley. He undertook construction in May and had work completed by July 1911. There it is completed. It took him 2 months. Can you imagine? You can't build a bridge that quickly. Staff moved from the temporary premises in the Pym Farm on Blandford Avenue, and the staff was increased by 4 people to a total of 5 moving into the hall. In 1913, electric light was introduced to Royal Oak. The flagpole at Municipal Hall was erected and painted for the sum of $75. Telephone service came to Royal Oak the following year. Already by 1914, 3 years later, the Municipal Hall was found to be too small. The engineering department was now situated in the council chambers. It's interesting how the councillors' offices and chambers always are valuable for something else. In 1915, alterations and additions were made to the Municipal Hall. Backwards, there you go. That's the addition at the rear. The contract for the work was let to Arthur Stewart at a Total cost of $787.60. How did they get down to 60 cents? During the time, the Municipal Hall was used as a meeting place for various organizations, and in 1916 it was used for forming of a Farmers Cooperative Association. So that's 1980. Some employees outside the Royal Oak Municipal Hall. And there we have some 1918 Saanich employees sitting around outside, and we know Annie Bull, Kathleen Butt, and Helen Elliott. In 2021, the court sessions were held at the hall. The hall was painted outside, and the main office calcimined. Now, if you remember, calcimine is a whitewash and a low-cost type of paint made from slack lime and chalk. In 1927, the sum of $600 was spent on alterations to the Municipal Hall, and now compared favorably with other municipal halls in BC. Over the years, the Municipal Hall housed doctors' and nurses' quarters on the lower floor. Other occupants were the Police Department, School Board Office, and Water Department. During 1938 of the summer months, the hall closed at 4:30 p.m. There's 1920 something. There are some Saanich employees outside. And now we get up to 1939. That's Reeve Lambert, and as you know, the name of Lambert Park, and Saanich councillors and the Municipal Hall staff. From 1939 to 1945, that is what the Municipal Hall, the Royal Municipal Hall, looked like during the World War II eras, and you can see the sign up there for victory bonds. In 1941, there was a general reshuffling of office space. Seems to be what they like to do in municipal halls, just keep reshuffling everybody. At least they didn't have IT then, which you needed a whole floor. The police department was moved to the school board offices, the school board to the Reeves office, and the water department equipment was moved to the police office on the main floor. So some things just never change. In 1944, the architect Hubert Savage submitted sketches for alterations to Municipal Hall. Sketches did not propose a lot of internal alterations, although it was going to be given a modern appearance. The changes to the exterior would be to obtain a modern appearance. To quote Mr. Savage's letter, which accompanied his draft plans, it would be advisable to eliminate the existing ponderous overhanging eaves. The outside walls would be cement stucco over existing shingle walls. Well, obviously, Mr. Savage did not care for Mr. Keith's architecture that was described at the time as having an understanding of architecture on a small scale. There was the sketch of the Municipal Hall proposed by Hubert Savage, an architect of renowned reputation. In 1947, Mr. Green, the assessor and collector, complained about the lack of space at the hall. Council instructed the architect Hubert Savage to prepare proper plans to renovate the building. The plans were presented to and approved by Council. In September that year, Council put a bylaw into vote at the December elections. Although successful, the plans were never built. As you know, it never looked like this. New wiring was installed because instead, again, they decided to renovate. New wiring was installed in the hall to accommodate billing machines. The electrical wiring inspector reported that the service in the hall was overloaded. The desk light was 10 candles and required light was 30 candles. Well, as much as I Googled that too, I couldn't figure out what 10 candles or 30 candles were. So anybody that's really knowledgeable can let me know how that translates into watts. But I gather it wasn't very much light. To offset the overloading, fluorescent lights were installed at the approximate cost of $1,000. The contracting company, Doolaball & Looney, a lot of us will remember that name, carried out the additions repairs for $18,178 plus $474 for additional flooring to the present building and hall additions. The addition was built to accommodate the assessing and accounting department. The basement portion of the building took care of the council chambers, welfare and police department, and also the health department and nurses' quarters. A 1-inch sprinkler system was installed at the time in the furnace room. There were now 47 employees in the hall. 20 years earlier, there had only been 18. This is a picture of what the police department's cars looked like in 1947. That's the whole fleet. This shows the extension of the building completed and it was completed in 1949. Also in 1949, Venetian blinds were installed in the new portion of the old hall. A seat was constructed outside the municipal hall so that employees could have their lunch there on pleasant days. A new trunk was added to the switchboard because lines were constantly busy. It's still the same thing. The switchboard is one of the most vital things the municipality has. I don't see us ever proceeding to press 1 for planning, press 2 for engineering. I can just imagine the pushback from the residents and the councillors. The council chamber was renovated and it improved at the cost of $548 in 1952. The municipal hall was constantly being pressed for space. The building inspector in 1953 got an estimate for new furniture, and general discussion began again regarding the possibility of erecting a new municipal hall or adding to the existing building. A recommendation came forward to purchase the property immediately south of the municipal yard. It was owned by the provincial government. Space requirements were continuously being requested by various departments. This is the municipal clerk and treasurer of 1953 working inside the Royal Oak Municipal Hall during the strike. In 1954, the Capital Region Planning Board and Town Planning Commission, I think that sounds an awful lot like CRD, doesn't it? Were requested to assist council by recommending the most suitable site and to provide assistance relevant to future development of the municipality. Even in the 1950s, we had worked with the Capital Region. In 1955, the Reeve brought forward 2 alternatives to providing additional office space. One was to build a hall at a more central location, the other to build an addition to the present hall. The Reeve estimated the cost of a new hall would be $400, $4,000, $40,000. There's a lot of zeros there. It was suggested the school board could be approached to see if they would sell 2 acres of the adjacent Royal Oak School property. The architects were asked to advise as to the feasibility of making an addition to the hall at the present location. By late in the year, it was felt that temporary measures converting the present council chambers, again, we're going to convert the council chambers into offices and make arrangements for holding council meetings in court in other premises that would provide much more space. The drafting section of the engineering was moved downstairs to the lunchroom. Didn't we do this 20 years before? And into the council chamber in 1956. For a cost of $75 per month, the Women's Institute next door was rented as council chambers and the basement kitchen as a lunchroom. The rent eventually increased to $120 a month, which no doubt influenced some of the decisions made by council. In June 1956, a meeting was held with Victoria to discuss the possibility of a joint municipal hall. A very cooperative meeting was held and the committee recommended to their councils that legal opinion be obtained regarding the power of the municipal council of Saanich and Victoria to join the construction of a joint municipal hall, and that the Capital Regional Planning Board be requested to study the matter and recommend a site location, and that the respective municipal councils obtain the opinion of their senior officials and the amount of space required for immediate needs and future expansion. In November, it was decided that ratepayers should be asked if they were in favor of providing additional office space by adding to the present municipal hall or to build a new municipal hall. Later, they also decided to ask if they were in favor of that. In the meantime, the present municipal hall was having new offices created at the cost of approximately $900. In 1957, Messrs. Whitaker and Wagg were engaged to bring a report regarding the addition of 9,000 square feet to the current municipal hall. The comptroller-treasurer was instructed to take necessary steps to obtain permission from the lieutenant governor and council to expend the sum of $95,000 from reverted land sales at the proposed municipal hall addition. It was suggested the police department move into the quarters vacated by the Bank of Montreal. These present premises on Viewmont rented for $125 a month plus light and heat. On January 20th, 1958, a councillor suggested consideration be acquiring 2 army huts from the Gordon Head Army Camp. This would provide an alternative and to the previous suggestions of needing temporary space. A letter was written to the Honourable G.R. Perks requesting the release of 2 army camp buildings at a nominal price. In April, 2 buildings arrived, number 1040 and 1042, and they were purchased from the Crown Assets Disposal Corporation at $460 each. Plans were drawn up by the municipal engineer They were approved, and in June, the tender to Burroughs Bradley Gardner Limited of $2,700.60 was approved for moving the buildings to the present location in Royal Oak. The buildings were temporary quarters for the police, engineering, building departments, and council chamber for a sum total of $37,000, $143.96. Drives me crazy how they can come up with 96 cents. Do you all remember it looking like that?
I don't remember it at all. I was there.
Carol's nodding. In 1959, the Municipal Hall Reserve Bylaw was passed, setting aside funds for the building of a future new hall. In 1960, the bylaw was publicized for a new building. A new police fire hall building was completed in 1962. The new police quarters housed the offices for the chief of police, magistrate, deputy, and various others, as well as a courtroom, charge office, interview room, traffic lounge, pistol range, dark room, lecture room, and garage. The fire department section of the buildings was much more spacious than their previous quarters and was equipped with up-to-date systems. In September, work was started in the construction of the health and welfare building. A fire alarm system was installed in the old hall at the cost of $3,920 and a monthly rental of $105. Sounds pretty expensive for an alarm system, doesn't it? The system was put in with a proviso that if they were to move to the new premises after the service had been operating for a period of 3 years, the municipality may terminate the contract without penalty. A new switchboard was installed at the cost of $900. The Health Center addition was completed in the spring of 1963, as was the Health and Welfare Building, which accommodated the Welfare Department and the Saanich branch of the Provincial Health Department. Wade, Stockdale, Armour, and Partners were appointed architects for the new hall. In July, they were asked to make a model of the new hall, and the cost of preliminary sketches and model was $8,140. The model was to be displayed in various parts of the municipality, and members of council were to explain the details to the public. So it's nice to see we're following the same process. On July 21st, 1964, tenders for the building of the new municipal hall were opened, and the tender of G.H. Wheaton in the amount of $611,616 was accepted. In October, the architects were retained to design furnishings so that uniform specifications will be available to those submitting a tender. The site on Vernon Avenue was selected as the municipal hall was intended to form a nucleus of the municipal administration center at Swan Lake with the fire and police building and health and welfare building. The architects were required to design a building with function as a modern office building, but at the same time create a civic core. The nature and location of the building called for a very strong building form. This in turn required a massive appearance and was decided in the model stage to construct in concrete, using concrete as the finished material. As concrete was normally designed to have you were made in forms and then they were finished, this was quite unusual. All the concrete was designed to look massive and permanent and suggest lasting strength. This type of design is very rare in Western Canada, and at the time of the design, the architects were pioneering the use of concrete as a design element. In this type of construction, every board mark and construction joint is used to carry out the theme in the building. The Municipal Hall on Vernon Avenue, if you ever have a chance to actually have a look, it is a fabulous building with artistic design at every part of its structure. The architecture design was influenced by the brutalist architecture, appropriate named, I think, of the Swiss architect Le Corbusier. The embossing in the concrete forms the pictures in many ways of farmers and plowing the fields and such. For years, they were covered with vegetation outside, and you couldn't see that. Inside, it was covered by signs for the photocopier and a variety of things. When I was on the Arts Committee, when I was a citizen, before being elected, we went to great lengths and had a study done of exactly what the important features were, and there is now a plan and a policy where things are no longer are stuck up against the concrete. The gardening, the landscaping has been moved away and is very attractive. So if you have a chance sometime, really, rather than just rushing in and paying your taxes, which is good, do that. But just actually have a look at the building because it is very impressive. The furnishings as well, whatever is done is always made to match and keep the appearance of the original furnishings, and many of them are still the original. The building is a heritage building. The use of concrete was substantially more economical, and the total building area is 35,402 square feet. I really have trouble with numbers, it appears. The official opening was led by Mayor Harry Curtis and council. Oh, I missed these pictures. I'm sorry. 1964, this was Ken Middleton, if you ever remember Ken Middleton. He was known as Mr. Saanich. And Joanne Morrison in the basement of the Royal Oak Municipal Hall. This was when they were moving. My mother's cousin, Peter McKechnie, worked for Saanich at that time, and he worked with Ken Middleton. And he always talked about moving, helping move and set up the municipal hall. In 1965, the Saanich police were jobbers. I'm sure they were pleased there was only 4 of them. 1965, Lieutenant Governor George Perks did the honors of cutting the ribbon at the Saanich Municipal Hall. With the completion of the new hall on Vernon Avenue, the old one at 4512 West Saanich Road acquired commercial zoning and became a credit union office. The commercial zoning became a threat to its existence, as all that was needed to replace it with a larger, more modern commercial building was a demolition permit. However, in 1977, a heritage committee was struck to look at important heritage structures in the municipality. Many had already been lost during the heydays of the 60s and the whirlwind growth. Council debated the legality of, the morality of, and the ability for the municipality to declare privately owned properties heritage. However, 15 buildings, in 1979, 15 buildings were declared heritage. It was declared that they had significant importance to Saanich history, and they were given heritage designation status by Saanich Council. One of these was the old Municipal Hall on West Saanich Road. Had it not been for that bylaw designating it a heritage structure, it indeed would not exist today. At that time, after it was declared heritage, and this is the bylaw that declared that, the council revoked a demolition permit issued to Crescent Construction Corporation to rezone the property for a large retail commercial development. So that's how close it was to not having that exist any longer. Mayor Mal Cavalier at the time suggested it would be a great reuse of the building to be a pub. Councillors Micah and Casilio suggested the exploring of a heritage enclave in Royal Oak, comprised of the old municipal hall, the old Royal Oak School, and the thatch, which we now know as the Fireside Grill. I would say their vision has been what achieves the retention and active repurposing of these 3 heritage buildings. The old municipal hall has operated successfully as the Med Grill for many years. And I suggest next time you dine there, don't forget to go and check out the old photos if you haven't already. I mean, you know, on the way to the washroom, there they are. You can have a look at all those. And local legend has it that the old jail cells are still in the basement, but it could be just a legend because I've never had an opportunity to go down and investigate. I was asked when I told people I was researching this, find out about the jail cells, but I didn't find anything. The old hall is a significant example of arts and crafts style, allied to the traditional craftsman residential vocabulary, which was typically used throughout British Columbia for municipal halls of the Edwardian era. By using a common architectural style, this allowed the institution to reflect the values and inspirations of the local community. The arts and crafts style also demonstrated an allegiance to British legislative antecedents and demonstration of loyalty to the mother country. Original features include prominent bell-cast hip roof with wide eaves, multiple assembly wood sash windows, and the use of indigenous materials, including the fieldhouse foundation and cedar shingle cladding. Just think back to what Hubert Savage was planning to do with that. The old municipal hall is also representative of the growth and governance of the municipality of Saanich and its reflection on the efforts and aspirations of the community building spirit of pioneer era. The new municipal hall on Vernon Avenue, completed in 1965, represents the large-scale and increased administrative function of the municipality. The contrast between the old and new halls being so great helps to identify the origins and tremendous growth of the municipality of Saanich. That's it. Now,
Thank you very much, Vicki.
I'd like to take you for a little tour, though, through the archives. And just because that information you just couldn't find anywhere. And it was the archives that was of the great assistance to being able to get the information needed for this project and for many projects. And they certainly appreciate what you're doing here. How many of you been to the archives? Very good. And they're very helpful there, aren't you? I phoned them twice today. I asked if that was my limit. Because I'd asked 2 questions the first time. And they were very nice. I think I got a bit of pull though. The archives, for those of you that don't know, are on at the Centennial Library, which is if you only go and play hockey and don't go to the library, it's at Brooks Arena. Right in the back corner, and they're absolutely super people there. They'll help you. There's the website on there. There's the archives website, and as well as their email address. If you haven't been to the archives, you can drop in for a tour any morning, Monday morning at 10 a.m. And the tours take about 30 minutes, and they'll show you through how to use the files and such, because they have the files of all the information, you know, in hard copy and such, and then they have things that are copies. They'll provide you, as it says, with the overview of the reference materials, and you don't have to have a registration to do that. And the Saanich Archives, if you go on the Saanich website and you go onto the archives, you'll get a drop-down menu, and they'll have the first listing will be heritage. And in that will have just Saanich heritage information about heritage register, alteration requests, grants and such. But if you go to that heritage archives, although being the same, the archives are the keeper of the information. So on the archives, when you go there, you can find where you can search photos, what news and events are going on, and it tells you that they've got the census program going on. This Remember World War I, their exhibits, and how to plan a visit, which just as mentioned. So the photographs, they have 15,000 images, and it was pretty incredible how, when I wanted to find pictures for this, so you get a screen that comes up, and you fill in what your keyword is, which I put municipal hall. The subject, I wanted all of it, and it was in the Royal Oak area. And then it just came up with this whole list of pictures, just little thumbnails, of all the pictures imaginable. And so you can do this for any area. And as I say, it's absolutely incredible. And these are pictures that are being donated. Also on there, once you get this, it has the number for the photos. So you can go back. So when I wanted to select the pictures, I just had to put the number down, the one I wanted. And then you can just copy and save them onto your own website. There are also some photos that there's an agreement if you're going to use them in a publication and that. So there's those stipulations as well. So Heritage Week's coming up, and that's from February the 17th to 23rd, and there's lots of activities always going on, so it's worthwhile checking this website. And it's going to be about the Captain Voss. You've probably all heard about Captain Voss, and then they're doing it with a partnership with the museum, the Maritime Museum. So if you, it's on Wednesday, February the 19th and the 20th. So if you want to get more information out, you can go down and see that. And then there's the archives opening, and that's on Wednesday, February the 29th and 20th. I mentioned that. So I went last year, and you can just go into the archives and see what's happening there. Now this census project, they're looking for volunteers. Have any of you volunteered for the census project?
Yep.
Oh, did you?
Yep, I'm working on a page right now. That's what they look like. Sometimes they're a little hard to read.
Mm-hmm. So it's the 1911 and 1921 census. I was fortunate; they just gave me a short page. But this one, like this is very typical of what you'll get, and then you just transpose it, and it comes out into a form like this. But it's just great because we're going to have the Saanich census online, and there's a lot of errors in the ones that Ancestry.com have done. And so they're going to, when it's all finished, they're going to submit it to them. And when I did it, I was looking in the Cloverdale area. I thought I'll go and look, and because they're being transcribed in India, a lot of the yes, yeah, not here, but for ancestry.com. So a lot of the spellings of the roads and such names are quite wrong because they have no concept that they wouldn't be correct. But like this one is, this page is Royal Oak, so I'll let you have a look at it and I can pass it around. And hard to read, as you say. The writing is very tiny. So if you want to volunteer, that's a tremendous thing to get involved in. I think we're really lucky to have a very progressive archives, and I think it rubs off too in groups such as yourself form. The other project that's on is Saanich Remembers World War I, and they're asking people if you have pictures or ancestors or things that you would like to contribute. They're putting the diaries and such together. This is happening across Canada. They're doing an honor roll for the records from 1914 to 1918. So again, it's on the Saanich website, and you can check it out. I'll pass this way. Now, I wished I could go on and show you this, but try it yourself. It's called History Pin, and what the archives has done is they've put different Saanich heritage pictures on. Well, they've taken the current picture, and then they superimposed a picture over top of it, and they've matched them up, and you can actually see what it was like and what it's like now. And you can even put that little guy, like Google's map and walking around. It's a little bit tricky, but it's really interesting to see to this. So that's that history pin. And I wanted to let you know, we talked about what does the archives have. So their recent accessions is that they've got all the corporate records from the district of Saanich now. They've had lots of donations of drawings and maps and plans, and they got thousands of plans that people have given to them, in addition to their house. It's just unbelievable. And again, they're just asking, and if people have things to donate them, and if you don't want to donate the originals, donate a copy. And in the corporate records, they've got the minutes, as it says here, from 1906 to 1969, and I'm really tickled about that because I kept water dropping on the rock. I was the liaison to legislative services, and I kept saying how valuable their records are. So I'm glad to see the archives has got them now. The mayor's office correspondence right up from 1915 to 1984. Planning department correspondence, finance department. And you're talking about school records. So they've got South Saanich School, Tommy School, Cedar Hill School, Elk Lake School, Gordon Head and Lake School, which is yours, but it's just the minutes. Prospect Lake School and other school records of a variety of things. And family records, they've got Thomas and Maud Hall, which is Hall House, which is on Burnside Road, and they also call it Stratton Lodge, and it's owned by the municipality. And what does this say? 120, oops, that's the end of the story, 120 oral histories. Wonderful place to visit. They're more than happy to help you with anything that you want. And on the other hand, they're more than happy to look after your treasures for you as well.
Thank you very much.
Well, I hope it was what you were looking
Yes,
for.
it was.
And it was a great treat for me too, even though I stumble all over those numbers, because I'm not used to talking about that small. We don't know dollars. We talk now in billions. And, it doesn't even faze me. I remember when I was first elected, and I can't remember what the budget was like then. I don't know how many million. It's like, is this right? Yeah, that's what it is. Thank you.